First contact gone wrong. The emergency klaxons blared throughout the Kravani monitoring station as sensor arrays detected an unknown vessel crossing into their territorial space. Senior observer Nexferic's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary set scanned the incoming data streams. His scaled fingers tapped rapidly across the control interface as subordinates rushed to their stations. Classification, Nexferic demanded, his voice carrying the distinctive metallic resonance of the Kravani elite caste. Unknown configuration, observer, responded the sensor technician. Propulsion signature doesn't match any known species in our database. Size indicates a medium exploration vessel. Nexferic's dorsal membranes fluttered in annoyance. The Kravani Dominion had maintained unchallenged supremacy in this sector for over 12 cycles. Any unregistered vessel was a potential threat to their carefully established order. Attempt communication on all standard frequencies, he ordered, and power up the defense grid as a precaution. The communication officer's appendages worked deftly across her console. Transmitting now. No response. Minutes passed. The unknown ship continued its approach, maintaining a steady vector toward the Kravani outpost. They're ignoring our hails, Nexferic muttered. Arrogance or incompetence, neither is acceptable. Activate targeting systems and prepare a warning shot. The defense officer hesitated. Sir, our scans indicate biological signatures on board. They appear to be mammals. Nexferic's membrane stiffened. Mammals. Sentient mammals achieve spaceflight. The concept was almost laughable. In Kravani evolutionary biology, mammals were considered an evolutionary dead end, creatures of instinct rather than intellect. The idea that such beings could master interstellar travel was absurd. Fire the warning shot, Nexferic commanded. Let's see how these mammals respond to a demonstration of superior technology. The outpost's primary disruptor cannon discharged a precisely calibrated energy pulse designed to pass within 50 units of the approaching vessel, close enough to register on any sensory equipment, but not to cause damage. What happened next would be recorded in Kravani military archives as the beginning of the most significant miscalculation in their species' history. The energy pulse struck the unknown vessel directly, despite the targeting calculations indicating it should have missed by a significant margin. The ship's exterior shimmered as some form of defensive field absorbed much of the blast, but the impact was still substantial. The vessel immediately altered course, accelerating away from the outpost at impressive speed. Direct hit. Nexferic's voice carried disbelief. That's impossible. Our targeting systems are precise to the micron. The defense officer's voice trembled. Sir, it appears their vessel moved into the path of our warning shot. Moved? Intentionally. Nexferic's four eyes blinked in sequence. Why would they? He was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The communication officer looked up in surprise. We're receiving a message, sir. It's in our language. Perfect syntax and intonation. On screen, Nexferic ordered. A face appeared on the central display. The being was unmistakably mammalian, hairless except for the top of its head, with only 2 eyes and a disturbing lack of protective exoskeleton. Yet something in those eyes made Nexferic's blood run cold. This is Captain Mira Chen of the Earth science vessel Curiosity, the mammal stated, its voice unnervingly calm. We came in peace to establish first contact. You have fired upon an unarmed scientific vessel. This action constitutes an act of war under Terran Confederation law. You have 72 hours to present diplomatic representatives for negotiations or face the consequences of your aggression. The transmission ended before Nexferic could respond. Sir, the sensor technician's voice was barely audible. We're detecting a quantum communication burst from the damaged vessel. It's directed toward the edge of the system. Nexferic's worst fears were confirmed when the long-range sensors registered a gravitational anomaly forming at the system's edge 6 hours later. Something massive was emerging from faster-than-light travel. The vessel that appeared dwarfed anything in the Kravani defense fleet. Its hull was matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making it appear like a ship-shaped void against the stars. No visible weapons emplacements were detectable, but something about its design suggested immense power contained within. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced, her voice quivering. This time, the face that appeared belonged to a different human, female like the first, but with darker skin and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything about the Kravani station in seconds. "This is Commander Elena Reyes of the United Earth ship Thunderbolt. You have attacked an unarmed Earth vessel. Your 72-hour window has been rescinded." The transmission cut off. Moments later, alarms blared as the station's sensors went completely blind. "What's happening?" Nex Varric demanded. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse," the sensor technician reported frantically. "But it's selective, only targeting our sensor arrays and communication systems." Nex Varric felt genuine fear for the first time in his long career. "Order all available defense ships to intercept." The 3 patrol vessels stationed at the outpost accelerated toward the human warship. They were the pride of the Kravani fleet, sleek, heavily armed, and supposedly impervious to conventional weaponry. The human ship made no attempt to evade. It remained motionless as the Kravani vessels approached, weapons charged. Only when they were within optimal firing range did the Thunderbolt respond. There was no visible weapon discharge, no energy beam or projectile. Instead, the 3 Kravani ships simply stopped. Their engines went dark, weapons systems powered down, and they began to drift aimlessly. "What did they do?" Nex Varric whispered. The answer came from a new transmission, audio only this time. "Your vessels have not been destroyed." Commander Reyes stated matter-of-factly. "We've temporarily disabled their systems. Their life support remains functional. Consider this a demonstration of restraint." A pause. The UEA's Curiosity was conducting peaceful scientific research. 7 of its crew died in your unprovoked attack. I am authorized to demand reparations and a formal apology from your government. You have 24 hours to arrange a diplomatic meeting. After that, we will consider all Kravani military installations legitimate targets." The message ended. The senior strategic advisor, who had remained silent until now, approached Nex Varric with alarming calm. "Observer, I recommend immediate communication with High Command. These humans, they could have destroyed us but chose not to. That suggests either remarkable restraint or what?" Nex Varric asked. "Or what we've witnessed is merely a fraction of their capabilities." The message to High Command was sent with the highest priority designation. The response came quickly, and it was not what Nex Varric had hoped for. High Command dismissed the threat. The Kravani Dominion had conquered 17 star systems. They would not be intimidated by mammals, regardless of their technology. The High Admiral was dispatching a battle group of 30 warships to deal with this human vessel. As Nex Varric read the orders, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Kravani Dominion was about to learn a costly lesson about underestimating an unknown species. On the bridge of the Thunderbolt, Commander Elena Reyes reviewed the intercepted Kravani communications with her executive officer. "They're sending 30 ships," Commander Jackson observed. "They still think this is about firepower." Reyes nodded, her expression grim. "Then we'll have to educate them on human ingenuity." She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, battle stations, prepare for Operation Thunderclap." Throughout the massive warship, over 1,000 crew members moved with practiced efficiency. The Thunderbolt had never been deployed in actual combat before. It had never needed to be. Its mere presence had always been enough to end conflicts before they began. Today would be different. Today, humanity would reveal just how terrible they could be when provoked. And somewhere across the vastness of space, thousands more human warships waited, ready to respond if one proved insufficient. Outmaneuvered and outgunned, the Kravani battle group emerged from FTL in perfect formation, a crescent of 30 warships representing the pinnacle of Kravani military might. At the center, aboard the dreadnought Inevitable Dominance, High Admiral Zev Terek observed the tactical display with confidence bordering on contempt. "There it is," he remarked to his command staff, gesturing toward the solitary human vessel. "One ship against 30. These mammals will learn the price of challenging the Dominion." Only one officer seemed less than enthusiastic about their overwhelming advantage. Admiral Zelfar, a veteran of border skirmishes with the notoriously unpredictable Vorak swarm, studied the human ship with professional interest rather than dismissive arrogance. "High Admiral," Zelfar ventured carefully, "request permission to conduct further scans before engagement. The vessel's configuration is unlike anything in our records." Zev Tarek's primary eyes narrowed in annoyance. "Denied. We have our orders from the Grand Dominator himself. This display of mammalian audacity ends now." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their propulsion systems. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. The Grand Dominator wishes to examine their technology." Zelfar's membranes fluttered in disapproval, but he kept his concerns to himself. Something about the human ship's positioning bothered him. It sat motionless, making no attempt to retreat despite being catastrophically outnumbered. Either its commander was suicidally incompetent or "Weapons locked," announced the tactical officer. "All ships reporting ready." "Fire," ordered Zev Tarek. 30 Krivani warships unleashed a synchronized barrage of disruptor beams and quantum torpedoes. The space between them and the human vessel lit up with destructive energy that should have overwhelmed any conceivable defense system. But when the energy dissipated and the sensor readings cleared, the Thunderbolt remained intact, surrounded by a faintly shimmering field that had apparently absorbed the combined firepower of the Krivani battle group. "Impossible," whispered Zev Tarak. "No defense system could withstand that level of concentrated fire." Before anyone could respond, the human ship began to move, not in retreat, but directly toward the Krivani formation, accelerating at a rate that defied the physics of its mass. "Evasive maneuvers," Zelfar shouted, his military instincts overriding the chain of command. The warning came too late. The Thunderbolt passed through the Krivani formation like a phantom, seemingly phasing between the tightly grouped ships without physical contact. As it passed, ship after ship reported critical system failures. "What's happening?" demanded Zev Tarek, as the tactical display showed nearly a third of their fleet suddenly disabled. "Some kind of localized electromagnetic disruption," reported the science officer. "They've neutralized our ships without firing a single conventional weapon." The Thunderbolt completed its run through the formation and then performed a maneuver that should have torn any spacecraft apart, a 180-degree turn at full acceleration. It now faced the disorganized Krivani fleet from the opposite side. "Reform the line," ordered Zev Tarak. "All functioning vessels, concentrate fire on." His orders were interrupted by a new development. The space around the Thunderbolt shimmered as hundreds of small objects deployed from its hull, spreading outward in a carefully orchestrated pattern. "Mines?" questioned the tactical officer. Zelfar's experience told him otherwise. "No. Drones or decoys." He was proven correct moments later when each object activated, projecting an energy signature identical to the Thunderbolt itself. Suddenly, instead of one target, the Krivani sensors showed hundreds, indistinguishable from the original. "Lock onto the original vessel's position," Zev Tarek commanded, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't, High Admiral," responded the tactical officer. "They're all broadcasting the same identification signals. Our targeting systems cannot distinguish the real ship from the projections." For the first time, uncertainty crept into Zev Tarek's expression. The battle was not proceeding according to doctrine. The humans were employing tactics that had no counter in the Krivani military manual. Zelfar stepped forward. "High Admiral, request permission to take tactical command. I've studied unconventional warfare techniques that might be effective against." "Silence," Zev Tarak hissed. "This is a simple matter of technological superiority. Our numbers will prevail." He turned to the communications officer. Order all remaining ships to fire on all targets simultaneously. We will overwhelm their defenses through sheer volume. The remaining functional Krivani ships complied, firing indiscriminately at the cloud of potential targets. Most shots passed harmlessly through holographic projections, but occasionally a real drone was hit, exploding with surprising force and temporarily blinding nearby Krivani sensors. From the apparent chaos, the real thunderbolt emerged, targeting individual Krivani vessels with precision strikes. Not with conventional weapons, but with focused beams that somehow caused Krivani technology to turn against itself. Ship after ship reported their reactor containment fields failing, weapons systems overloading, or navigation computers executing random jumps that took them light years from the battlefield. Within 20 minutes of engagement, 2/3 of the Krivani battle group was either disabled or had fled the battlefield due to critical system failures. Not a single ship had been destroyed, but neither had any managed to inflict appreciable damage on the Thunderbolt. On the bridge of the inevitable dominance, High Admiral Zev Terek watched in stunned disbelief as his command crumbled around him. "This cannot be happening," he muttered. "The Dominion has never known defeat." Zelfar ignored the High Admiral's shock and took command of the remaining ships. "All vessels, disengage and regroup at coordinates Delta 7. Maintain communication silence and stand by for further orders." As the surviving Krivani ships retreated to a safe distance, Zelfar studied the human vessel with new respect. They had not destroyed a single Krivani ship despite clearly having the capability to do so. Their attack had been surgical, designed to neutralize rather than annihilate. "They're showing restraint," he observed aloud. "Despite our attack on their science vessel, they're limiting casualties." Zev Tarek snapped out of his shock long enough to scoff. "Weakness. They lack the resolve to do what is necessary." "No," Zelfar countered. "Not weakness. Something far more concerning." "Explain," demanded Zev Tarek. "They don't need to destroy us to defeat us," Zelfar said simply. "This isn't a demonstration of their martial prowess. It's a demonstration of their technological superiority. They're not fighting at full capacity. They're teaching us a lesson." On the Thunderbolt's bridge, Commander Rise watched the Krivani fleet's retreat with grim satisfaction. "They're regrouping," reported the tactical officer. "Formation suggests they're preparing for another attack." "They're persistent," Rise acknowledged, "and still not getting the message." She turned to her communications officer. "Contact Admiral Zelfar directly." The officer looked up in surprise. "Ma'am, how do you know which officer to?" "Because he's the only one showing any tactical sense," Rise replied. "Find his ship and establish a direct channel." Minutes later, Admiral Zelfar was surprised to receive a transmission addressed specifically to him, bypassing the High Admiral entirely. "Admiral Zelfar," Commander Rise began without preamble, "I am offering you an opportunity to end this conflict before it escalates further." Zelfar glanced at the fuming High Admiral before responding. "Commander Rise, I am not authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Dominion." "I'm not asking for negotiations," Rise clarified. "I'm offering information. What you've witnessed today represents less than 15% of the Thunderbolt's offensive capabilities. We have exercised extreme restraint to minimize Krivani casualties." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. The UEA's Curiosity was a scientific vessel on a mission of peaceful first contact. Your unprovoked attack resulted in 7 deaths. In response, we could have destroyed your entire battle group. Instead, we've simply disabled it. Another pause. "Earth is not interested in war with the Krivani Dominion, Admiral. But make no mistake, if forced to engage in one, we will not show the same restraint demonstrated today." The transmission ended, leaving Zelfar with much to consider. "Preposterous threats," Zev Tarek snarled. "Prepare the remaining ships for a coordinated assault." "We will." "High Admiral," Zelfar interrupted, "an action unprecedented in Krivani military protocol. I respectfully suggest we withdraw and consult with the Grand Dominator." These humans have demonstrated technological capabilities beyond our current understanding. Continuing this engagement without further analysis would be tactically unsound. Zev Tarek's membranes flared in anger. You suggest retreat. Before mammals. I suggest survival, Zelfar countered. These mammals have neutralized 2/3 of our most advanced battle group without destroying a single vessel. They're displaying not just technological superiority, but strategic restraint. We need to reassess our approach. For a tense moment, it seemed Zev Tarek might order Zelfar's arrest for insubordination. But the tactical reality was undeniable. The battle was lost before it had truly begun. Very well, the High Admiral conceded bitterly. All ships, return to homeworld. We will consult with the Grand Dominator on our next course of action. As the Krivani fleet retreated, Zelfar remained on the observation deck, watching the distant silhouette of the human warship. He had encountered a species unlike any the Dominion had faced before, one that valued restraint alongside strength, that could have destroyed them but chose not to. For the first time in his long military career, Zelfar felt something beyond the patriotic certainty of Krivani superiority. He felt curiosity about these humans and what else they might be capable of, both in war and perhaps in peace. Understanding through strength. The Grand Dominator's palace on Krev Prime had never before hosted an emergency session of the High Council. The ornate chamber, with its towering crystalline spires and ancient battle trophies, was designed to intimidate, to remind all who entered of the Dominion's thousands of years of conquest and rule. Today, however, the opulence seemed hollow as the highest officials of the Krivani government gathered to address a threat none had anticipated. Preposterous, exclaimed Defense Minister Vexmera, his scales flushed with agitation. One vessel cannot defeat a battle group of 30. High Admiral Zev Tarek's report must be exaggerated. The sensor logs do not lie, countered Science Minister Ithnera, her secondary eyes focused on the holographic display showing the Thunderbolt's impossible maneuvers. This human vessel possesses technology that defies our understanding of physics. Grand Dominator Kresnar, ruler of 17 star systems and over 40 subject species, observed the debate with growing irritation. His ancient scales, bearing the ceremonial scars of 100 victories, tightened around his massive frame. Enough, he finally interjected, his voice carrying the artificial resonance of the Dominator's amplification system. What matters is not how they defeated our forces, but what they intend to do next. His primary eyes fixed on Admiral Zelfar, who stood apart from the other military officials. Admiral, you had direct communication with the human commander. What is your assessment of their intentions? Zelfar stepped forward, aware that his next words might determine the fate of the Dominion. Grand Dominator, it is my belief that the humans do not seek conquest. Their actions show remarkable restraint. They disabled our vessels without destroying them, minimizing casualties despite our unprovoked attack on their science ship. Weakness, scoffed Zev Tarak. No, Zelfar countered firmly. Discipline. These humans possess the power to obliterate our forces, but choose precision instead. This suggests a species confident in their capabilities, confident enough that they don't need to demonstrate their full strength. The Grand Dominator's membranes fluttered thoughtfully. What do you propose, Admiral? Diplomatic contact, Zelfar replied without hesitation. We must learn more about these humans, their civilization, their values, their full capabilities. And he hesitated, knowing his next suggestion would be controversial. We must acknowledge our error in attacking their science vessel. The council chamber erupted in outrage. Never in its long history had the Dominion acknowledged error to another species. Conquest, subjugation, and assimilation were the Krivani way, not apology or diplomacy between equals. The Grand Dominator raised a clawed hand for silence. Age had brought wisdom, if not humility, to the ancient ruler. Admiral Zelfar will attempt diplomatic contact, he declared, but simultaneously we will prepare our full military might. If diplomacy fails, we will show these humans the true power of the Dominion. The decision made, the council dispersed. Only Zelfar and the Grand Dominator remained in the vast chamber. You truly believe these mammals are worth talking to? The Grand Dominator asked, his artificial resonance deactivated, voice now showing his genuine curiosity. I believe, Grand Dominator, that any species that could have destroyed us, but chose not to deserves at least to be heard, Zelfar replied. And I believe we may have much to learn from them. On the Thunderbolt, Commander Rice reviewed the latest intelligence reports with her senior staff. Long-range sensors had detected massive fleet movements throughout Kravani space, hundreds of warships being repositioned, defensive grids around key worlds being strengthened. They're preparing for war, observed Commander Jackson, mobilizing everything they have, while simultaneously opening diplomatic channels, added Political Officer Chen. Admiral Zelfar has requested a formal meeting. Rice nodded thoughtfully. Classic hedging strategy. Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The question is, Jackson continued, which approach represents their true intentions? Both, Rice replied. They're a species that values strength above all else. They won't genuinely negotiate until they're convinced they can't win through force. She stood and approached the tactical display. So we need to make that point unmistakably clear. She turned to her communications officer. Accept Admiral Zelfar's request for a meeting, but not aboard either of our vessels. We'll meet at these coordinates. She transmitted a set of coordinates in neutral space, and informed him I'll be coming with an escort. The designated meeting point was a barren asteroid at the edge of the disputed system, neutral ground, with no strategic advantage to either side. The Kravani arrived first, with Admiral Zelfar's command ship accompanied by 4 heavy cruisers. When the Thunderbolt arrived several hours later, it was not alone. Space shimmered as 5 additional human warships decloaked, each as large as the Thunderbolt, each radiating the same mysterious energy signature that had neutralized the Kravani battle group. Impressive theatrical entrance, Zelfar remarked to his aide as they prepared to board the shuttle for the meeting on the asteroid's surface. Sir, the aide replied hesitantly, intelligence suggests the humans only had 1 vessel in this sector. They didn't, Zelfar replied. Until they did. That's the message they're sending. The meeting took place in an environmental dome hastily established on the asteroid's surface. Commander Rice and Admiral Zelfar sat across from each other at a simple table, each accompanied by a small delegation. Admiral, Rice began, I appreciate your willingness to meet. The Dominion is always open to diplomatic options, Zelfar replied carefully, although I must express surprise at your sudden reinforcements. Rice smiled slightly. Not reinforcements, Admiral. The Thunderbolt was always meant to be a diplomatic vessel, albeit one capable of defending itself. These additional ships are part of humanity's first contact protocol, activated only after your attack on the Curiosity demonstrated hostile intent. Before Zelfar could respond, the asteroid beneath them trembled slightly. Both delegations looked alarmed until a human aide approached Rice and whispered something in her ear. It seems, Rice announced, that your government is not fully committed to these negotiations. She activated a holographic display showing a massive Kravani fleet, over 200 warships, moving into position around the meeting site. Grand Dominator Krasnar believes a show of force will strengthen our negotiating position, Zelfar admitted, his membranes tight with embarrassment. I was not informed of this plan. Rice nodded understanding. Your Grand Dominator still doesn't comprehend what he's facing. She tapped a control on her wrist device. Perhaps a clearer demonstration is needed. The holographic display shifted to show the space around them from a wider perspective. Beyond the newly arrived Kravani Armada, hundreds of new contacts appeared, emerging from FTL in perfect sequence, forming a sphere that completely surrounded the Kravani fleet. Human warships, not 5 or 6, but over 500. This is the Terra Defense Fleet, Admiral, Rice explained calmly. mobilized when we lost contact with the curiosity. What you've witnessed until now has been extreme restraint on our part. One ship, the Thunderbolt, operating at minimal capacity to avoid unnecessary casualties. Zelfar stared at the display in stunned silence. The Kravani Dominion had just committed its entire military might to this confrontation, and found itself hopelessly outmatched. Your Grand Dominator believes strength is measured in destructive capacity, Rice continued. Humanity learned long ago that true strength lies in restraint, in having the power to destroy, but choosing not to use it. She leaned forward. We could have responded to your attack on the Curiosity by obliterating your outpost. Instead, we disabled your sensors. When you sent 30 ships against one, we could have vaporized them all. Instead, we temporarily neutralized their systems. Zelfar found his voice. Why such restraint? In your position, the Dominion would have. Exactly, Rise interrupted. And that's why you've conquered 17 systems, while we've established peaceful alliances with over 70 species. The difference isn't in our capability for violence, Admiral. It's in our preference for cooperation. For the first time in his long military career, Zelfar felt the foundations of his worldview shift. The Kravani philosophy had always been simple: the strong conquer, the weak submit. Yet here was a species demonstrably stronger than the Kravani, choosing negotiation over dominance. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Acknowledgement of your error in attacking the Curiosity, reparations to the families of the 7 crew members killed, and a formal non-aggression pact between our peoples. Not subjugation. Not resource concessions or territorial demands. Ray shook her head. Humans don't want subjects. Admiral, we want partners. The negotiations continued for several hours. When Zelfar finally returned to his ship, he carried with him a preliminary agreement that would forever change the Kravani Dominion's place in the galaxy. No longer would they be the unchallenged conquerors of their sector. They would need to learn the unfamiliar art of coexistence. 3 months later, on the rebuilt Kravani outpost where the conflict began, Senior Observer Nex Varric watched with mixed emotions as a new human vessel entered the system. Unlike the Thunderbolt, this ship was clearly designed for scientific research and cultural exchange. Its name, displayed prominently on its hull, seemed like a message in itself: UES Understanding. As the human delegation disembarked for the first official cultural exchange between their species, Nex Varric reflected on how quickly the Dominion's perspective had changed. The humans had proven that there was strength in restraint, power in cooperation, and wisdom in measured response. The Kravani had always believed themselves superior because of their willingness to conquer. The humans had proven themselves superior by their willingness not to, despite having every capability to do so. It was a humbling lesson, but perhaps one the Dominion had needed to learn. As the human ambassador approached, Nex Varric performed the newly established greeting protocol, a gesture acknowledging equals rather than subjects. Welcome to Kravani space, he said. We have much to learn from each other. The human ambassador smiled. That, Observer Nex Varric, is precisely why we're here. The universe, it seemed, was far more complex than the Kravani philosophy had accounted for. And these humans, these remarkably restrained yet terrifyingly capable humans, would make interesting allies indeed.